At 11:03 a.m., Staff Sergeant Frank Thompson crouched inside the turret of an M4 Sherman tank near Arracourt, France, watching his gunner prepare for an engagement they probably wouldn't survive. 24 years old, 4 months in combat, 12 miles, 0 times his gunner saw the Germans had 47 Panther tanks advancing. Thompson had been loading the 75mm gun for Sergeant William Crawford since June. Their survival depended on seeing German tanks first. But the Sherman's gunner sight was narrow. Crawford could only see 30 degrees. By the time the tank commander spotted a threat and Crawford traversed the turret, German gunners were aiming. The 4th Armored Division lost 23 Shermans in 3 weeks. The first loader Thompson lost was Corporal David Kozlowski. September 7th, Chicago, steel mill worker, trained together at Fort Knox. His Sherman took a Panther round at 1,300 yards. German gunner spotted them from a tree line. Aimed, fired. Shell penetrated the turret. Propellant charges ignited. Kozlowski was loading. Died instantly. His body stayed in the burning tank 3 hours. The second loader was Corporal James Martinez, September 16th, Thompson's best friend. Survived Normandy together. Talked about opening a garage after the war. Martinez's Sherman engaged 3 Panthers near Baisonge-la-Petite. Destroyed 1. A second Panther flanked them. Fired from 900 yards. Round went through the turret side. Martinez was pulling a shell. German round hit him directly. Killed instantly. Martinez's tank commander came to Thompson 2 days later. Said if they'd seen that Panther 3 seconds earlier, Martinez would still be alive. The officer was crying. By mid-September, Thompson had watched 11 loaders die. Every one because their gunner couldn't see threats fast enough. German tanks had better optics. American crews were brave, but you can't fight what you can't see. Thompson studied how engagements developed. Same pattern. German tank spotted Sherman first, took time to aim, fired accurately, hit first. Some crews survived, most didn't. The problem wasn't the gun. The 75mm could kill Panthers. The problem was seeing the target first. Crawford was good, but he could only see 30 degrees, not enough. Thompson needed to give Crawford more eyes, see threats instantly, not after the commander called them. Right now. Every second was the difference between loading another shell and dying like Martinez. The solution came September 18th. Simple. A mirror from his shaving kit, 3x4 inches, standard issue. Mounted inside the turret. Crawford could see behind them without traversing, see flanking threats, see what the tank commander saw. Completely illegal. Modifying equipment without authorization meant court-martial, but Martinez was dead. Kozlowski was dead. 11 loaders dead. Thompson didn't want to be 12. He'd install the mirror tonight, test it tomorrow. Either Crawford would see threats faster, or Thompson would die trying. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about these forgotten heroes, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. These stories matter. The men who lived them deserve to be remembered. You're part of making that happen. Thompson worked alone that night. The maintenance area was quiet after 2,200 hours. Most crews had gone to sleep. Only sounds were distant generators and insects against overhead lights. The air smelled like engine oil. September nights in Lorraine were cool. Thompson could see his breath. He pulled his tool bag from under his bunk. Inside was the mirror from his shaving kit. 3x4 inches, metal frame, government issue. Also, wire cutters, pliers, steel wire salvaged from destroyed equipment, and a flashlight with a dying battery. The Sherman sat in the maintenance line 50 yards away. Thompson walked over. Boots crunched on gravel. Nobody challenged him. Night maintenance was common. Thompson climbing into his own tank wouldn't raise questions. He opened the loader's hatch, climbed inside. The turret was cramped. Flashlight beam jumped across metal surfaces. Ammunition racks, the breech, the gunner's seat where Crawford would sit tomorrow. Thompson needed to mount the mirror where Crawford could see it without moving his head from the gun sight. The position had to be perfect. Too high, and Crawford couldn't see it while aiming. Too low, and it would block his movement. Thompson held the mirror in different positions, testing. His hands were shaking. Not from cold, from knowing this could get him court-martialed. He settled on a position 12 inches left of Crawford's seat, mounted at 45 degrees. The mirror would reflect what was behind the tank, anything approaching from rear or flanks. Crawford could glance at it without taking his eye off the main gun sight. 3-second check. Just enough to see if a Panther was flanking them. Thompson cut 4 6-inch pieces of steel wire, bent each into a U-shape, mounting brackets. He drilled holes in the turret wall using a hand drill. The bit squealed against armor plate. Thompson stopped every few seconds, listened, made sure nobody was coming. Nobody came. Installing the brackets took 40 minutes. His fingers kept slipping. Flashlight kept rolling away. Twice he dropped the pliers. Each sound made his heart pound. If an officer found him modifying the tank, he'd face charges: destruction of government property, unauthorized modification, disobeying regulations. Minimum punishment was reduction in rank. Maximum was prison. But Martinez was dead. Kozlowski was dead. 11 loaders were dead. Tomorrow Thompson would either be loading shells or burning in this turret. The mirror might give them 3 seconds. 3 seconds to see a Panther before it fired. 3 seconds to shoot first. 3 seconds to live. He secured the mirror to the brackets using wire, twisted it tight, tested the angle. The mirror showed the view behind perfectly. Thompson sat in Crawford's position, looked through the main gun sight, glanced left at the mirror. He could see both simultaneously. Main sight for targets ahead, mirror for threats behind. It worked. Thompson cleaned up, wiped away metal shavings. The modification looked crude, obviously not factory equipment, but functional. The turret was crowded with gear: ammunition racks, radio sets, fire extinguishers. One small mirror might go unnoticed during inspection. He climbed out at 0130, walked back to his bunk. Didn't sleep. Lay in the dark, thinking about tomorrow. The 4th Armored Division was moving at 0700. Intelligence reported German Panthers in the area. 5th Panzer Army trying to stop Patton's advance. Tomorrow would be a tank battle. Either the mirror would work, or it wouldn't. Either Crawford would see threats 3 seconds faster, or Thompson would die like his friends. No middle ground in tank combat. You shot first, or you burned. At 0615, Thompson heard engines starting. The battalion was preparing to move out. At 0712, Thompson's Sherman rolled out of the maintenance area. The engine rumbled. Tracks clanked against hard ground. Thompson sat in the loader's position, with 76 rounds of 75mm ammunition racked around him. Armor-piercing, high explosive, white phosphorus. He'd loaded these shells hundreds of times. Today might be the last time. Crawford was in the gunner's seat to Thompson's right. The tank commander stood in the cupola above them. The driver and assistant driver sat forward in the hull. 5 men in 30 tons of steel, rolling toward German positions 12 miles east. The battalion moved in column formation. 18 Shermans spread across 2 miles of French farmland, fields on both sides, tree lines in the distance, hills to the north. Perfect country for an ambush. The kind of terrain where Panthers hid and waited, where German gunners picked off American tanks one by one. Thompson watched Crawford. Crawford hadn't said anything about the mirror. Either he hadn't noticed it yet, or he was ignoring it. The mirror was mounted 12 inches to Crawford's left, angled at 45 degrees, reflecting the view behind the tank. Thompson had tested it last night. It worked, but combat would be the real test. At 0843, the radio crackled. Lead tank reported movement ahead. German armor. Panthers, maybe 6 of them. Range 2,000 yards, too far for accurate shooting. The battalion commander ordered the column to spread out, find hull-down positions, wait for the Germans to close the distance. Thompson's crew found a position behind a low ridge. The tank commander called out targets through the intercom. Crawford traversed the turret, searching. The main gun sight showed open farmland. No targets visible yet. The Germans were smart, using terrain, staying hidden until they had good shots. Thompson loaded an armor-piercing round, slammed the breech closed, tapped Crawford's shoulder. Ready. His heart was pounding, hands sweating. This was it. The moment that would prove whether the mirror worked, or whether Thompson had wasted his time drilling holes in government property for nothing. At 0907, Crawford fired. The gun recoiled. The breech opened. Hot brass casing ejected. Smoke filled the turret. Thompson grabbed another round. Loaded. The whole process took 6 seconds. Crawford was already traversing right, searching for the next target. Then Thompson heard Crawford's voice over the intercom. Calm, steady. Panther, left rear, 800 yards. Thompson's stomach dropped. Left rear meant flanking, meant a German tank had gotten around them, was coming at their side armor, the weakest part of the Sherman. A Panther round through the side would kill everyone. But Crawford had seen it. Without the tank commander calling it out, without traversing the turret to search, Crawford had glanced at the mirror, seen the Panther in the reflection, called it out immediately. The mirror worked. Crawford traversed left, fast. The turret whined. Thompson watched through the vision port, saw the Panther. It was moving across open ground, exposed. The German crew probably thought they were undetected, probably thought they had time to get into position, probably thought the Sherman hadn't seen them yet. They were wrong. Crawford fired. The round hit the Panther's left track, didn't penetrate the armor, but it stopped the German tank, immobilized it. The Panther tried to traverse its turret, tried to return fire. Crawford loaded another round faster than Thompson had ever seen, 7 seconds from first shot to second shot. The second round hit the Panther's turret side, penetrated. The German tank shuddered. Smoke poured from the hatches. The crew bailed out, running. The Panther was dead. Thompson had just watched Crawford kill a Panther that should have killed them. The German tank had flanked them perfectly, had gotten within 800 yards undetected, should have fired first, should have penetrated their side armor, should have killed Thompson and Crawford and everyone in the crew. But Crawford had seen it 3 seconds earlier because of the mirror. 3 seconds. That's all it took. 3 seconds to spot the threat, traverse the turret, fire first, win. The tank commander's voice came over the intercom, excited, asking how Crawford had seen that Panther so fast. Crawford said he'd glanced left, saw something in his peripheral vision. The tank commander didn't question it further, too busy directing them toward the next target. The engagement lasted 40 minutes. Thompson's crew destroyed 2 more Panthers. Other Shermans in the battalion got 3. German forces withdrew, left 7 burning Panthers behind. American losses were 2 Shermans, damaged, none destroyed, nobody killed. After the battle, Thompson's crew returned to the maintenance area. Crawford climbed out of the turret, found Thompson, looked at him for a long moment, then looked at the mirror mounted inside. Crawford reached out, touched it, tested the angle, saw how it reflected the view behind the tank. Crawford asked one question. "When did you install this?" Thompson told him. "Last night. Worked alone. Took 40 minutes. Completely illegal. Could get court-martialed if anyone found out. But Martinez was dead, and Thompson didn't want Crawford dying the same way." Crawford was quiet. Then he said something Thompson would remember for the rest of his life. "This saved us today. That Panther would have killed us if I hadn't seen it. I need you to do something for me." Thompson asked what. "Install one in every tank in the battalion." Thompson started with Crawford's wingman, Sergeant Robert Hayes. Hayes had lost his loader 3 weeks earlier, burned alive when a Panther hit them from the flank. Hayes survived with burns on his hands. His new loader was a replacement. Kid from Ohio, 18 years old, terrified. Thompson found Hayes that evening, told him about the mirror, showed him how it worked in Crawford's tank. Hayes looked at it, tested the angle, asked if Thompson could install one in his Sherman. Thompson said yes. Tonight. Don't tell anyone. They worked after 2,300 hours. Thompson brought his tools. Hayes kept watch. The installation took 35 minutes, faster than the first time. Thompson knew the exact position now, knew the angle, knew how to drill the holes without the bit squealing too loud. When they finished, Hayes tested it from the gunner's position, said it was perfect, Said his gunner would be able to see flanking threats instantly. Hayes asked Thompson how much he wanted. Payment for the work. Thompson said nothing. Just don't get killed. That's payment enough. The next day, Hayes's crew engaged 4 Panthers near Moncourt. Hayes's gunner spotted 2 of them using the mirror, called them out before they got into firing position. Destroyed both. Hayes came back raving about the modification, told every tank commander in the company. By evening, 6 more crews wanted mirrors. Thompson installed 3 more that night, 2 the night after. Word spread through the battalion faster than Thompson expected. Loaders talked to other loaders. Gunners talked to other gunners. Tank commanders started asking their crews if they'd heard about the mirror modification. Some crews were skeptical. Most wanted it immediately. By September 25th, Thompson had installed mirrors in 14 Shermans. He was exhausted, working maintenance during the day, installing mirrors at night, getting maybe 4 hours of sleep. But crews were surviving. The battalion's kill ratio had shifted. 5 Panthers destroyed for every Sherman lost. That ratio had been reversed a month ago. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams commanded the battalion. Abrams was a tanker's tanker. Aggressive, smart, knew armor combat inside and out. He noticed something was different. His crews were spotting German tanks faster, reacting quicker, winning engagements they should have lost. But he couldn't figure out what had changed. On September 27th, Abrams did an inspection of the tank line. Standard procedure, checking maintenance, verifying ammunition loads, ensuring equipment was combat ready. He climbed into Thompson's Sherman, looked around the turret. His eyes stopped on the mirror mounted to the left of the gunner's seat. Abrams asked what that was. Thompson's stomach dropped. This was it. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison. Everything he'd feared since installing the first mirror. Crawford spoke up before Thompson could answer. Said it was a modification they'd made. Helped the gunner see threats from the flanks. Had saved their lives twice in the past week. Abrams asked who authorized it. Crawford said nobody. They'd done it themselves. Knew it was against regulations, but it worked. Abrams stared at the mirror for a long time. Then he climbed out of the turret, walked down the line, climbed into Hayes's tank, saw another mirror, same position, same angle. Climbed into a third tank, another mirror. Abrams realized what was happening. Multiple tanks had been modified, all the same way, all without authorization. He called Thompson over, asked him directly, "Did you install these mirrors?" Thompson said, "Yes, sir, all of them. 14 tanks total. Took about 40 minutes per tank. Used salvaged materials. No requisitions, no paperwork. Completely illegal." Thompson stood at attention, waited for Abrams to order his arrest. Abrams asked how many tanks in the battalion didn't have mirrors yet. Thompson said 23, sir. Abrams looked at him, then said something Thompson never expected. "You have 48 hours to install mirrors in every tank in this battalion. That's an order. I'll handle the paperwork. You focus on keeping my crews alive." Thompson stood there, stunned. Abrams had just officially authorized the modification, made it legal, protected Thompson from court-martial. More than that, Abrams understood what the mirrors meant, understood they were saving lives, and he was willing to break regulations to save more. That night, Thompson worked faster than ever. He recruited other mechanics, showed them how to install the mirrors, taught them the position, the angle, the drilling technique. By September 29th, every Sherman in the battalion had a mirror. The modification was no longer a secret. It was standard equipment. The Battle of Arracourt started on September 19th and lasted 2 weeks. 4th Armored Division faced elements of 5th Panzer Army, 47 German Panthers and Panzer IVs against American Shermans. The Germans had better tanks, better guns, better armor, but they lost. American tankers destroyed over 60 German tanks, lost 18 Shermans. The kill ratio stunned German commanders. They'd been fighting Shermans for months, knew how to kill them, knew their weaknesses. But something had changed. American tanks were spotting German flanking maneuvers faster, reacting quicker, shooting first. German after-action reports mentioned unusual American tactics. Shermans were engaging targets they shouldn't have been able to see, reversing before German tanks could get into firing position. It was like American gunners had eyes in the back of their heads. They did. Simple 3x4-inch mirrors. By early October, word about the modification had spread beyond 4th Armored Division. Tank crews talked to other tank crews during resupply operations. Mechanics shared techniques. A crew chief from 6th Armored Division saw the mirrors during a visit to 4th Armored's maintenance area, asked Thompson how to install them. Thompson showed him. 2 days later, 6th Armored started installing mirrors in their Shermans. Then 10th Armored Division heard about it. Then 3rd Armored. The modification spread battalion to battalion, division to division. No official orders, no engineering directives. Just mechanics installing mirrors because they worked, because crews were surviving. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams wrote a report to 3rd Army Headquarters, described the mirror modification, included combat statistics. Before mirrors, 4th Armored was losing 2 Shermans for every German tank destroyed. After mirrors, they were destroying 3 German tanks for every Sherman lost. The difference was undeniable. The mirrors gave American gunners a tactical advantage that offset German superiority in armor and guns. General George Patton read the report. Patton commanded 3rd Army. He understood armor combat, understood that tank battles were decided by whoever shot first. The mirror modification gave American crews a few extra seconds. In tank combat, seconds meant everything. Patton ordered the modification installed in every Sherman in 3rd Army, not as a suggestion, as a direct order. Maintenance crews across the entire army began installing mirrors, using whatever materials they could find, salvaged metal, wire, even glass from broken windows. The mirrors didn't need to be fancy. They just needed to reflect. By October 15th, over 300 Shermans in Europe had mirrors. The modification had spread from one loader's desperate attempt to save his crew to an army-wide tactical advantage. And it had happened in less than a month. German intelligence tried to determine what had changed. They examined destroyed American tanks, found the mirrors, didn't understand their significance at first, thought they were personal items, shaving mirrors. It took several weeks before German analysts realized the mirrors were positioned specifically for the gunner to see behind the tank. By then it was too late. The modification had already spread throughout American armor units. German tactics that relied on flanking maneuvers were failing. Panthers that used to kill Shermans from the side were being spotted and destroyed before they could fire. The tactical advantage Germans had enjoyed for months was disappearing. German tankers started avoiding engagements with American Shermans unless they had overwhelming numerical superiority. The Panther was still the better tank, still had better armor and a better gun, but the Americans could see them coming. And in tank combat, seeing the enemy first mattered more than having the better weapon. Thompson had installed the first mirror to save Crawford. Now that mirror had saved hundreds of American tank crews. Men who would have died in flanking attacks were surviving. Going home. The modification cost nothing, required no new equipment, no factory production, just a small mirror and 40 minutes of work. But the Army wanted to make it official. In November 1944, an engineering team from Ordnance Department arrived at 4th Armored Division headquarters. 3 officers, 2 civilian engineers. They'd been sent to evaluate the mirror modification, determine if it should be integrated into standard Sherman production, make it official Army equipment instead of field improvisation. The team spent 3 days inspecting tanks, interviewing crews, testing the mirrors in combat simulations. They measured angles, calculated sightlines, verified that the modification didn't interfere with turret operations. Their conclusion was unanimous. The mirrors worked. They should have been part of the original design. The Ordnance Department recommended that all new Shermans rolling off production lines be fitted with mirrors in the gunner's position. Existing tanks in theater should be retrofitted during maintenance cycles. the modification would become official equipment. Standard issue. No longer illegal. But there was a problem. The engineers wanted to redesign the installation, make it cleaner, more professional, use manufactured brackets instead of bent wire, use regulation mirrors instead of salvaged shaving mirrors. They wanted to take Thompson's improvised solution and turn it into proper military equipment. Thompson didn't care about that. He cared that the engineers wanted credit. They were writing reports, submitting patents, claiming the mirror system as an Ordnance Department innovation. Thompson's name appeared nowhere in the documentation. Neither did Crawford's. Neither did Hayes's. The official record would show that Army engineers had developed an improved sighting system for Sherman tanks. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams tried to correct this. He wrote letters, submitted reports, made sure Thompson's name was in every document from 4th Armored Division. But those reports got buried, lost in the bureaucracy. The engineering team's version became the official story. Army engineers had identified a problem with Sherman gunner visibility and developed a solution. Thompson learned about this in December. An officer showed him the official documentation, asked if he wanted to file a complaint. Thompson said no. He didn't care about credit, didn't care about recognition. He cared that crews were surviving, that loaders weren't burning alive because their gunners couldn't see threats. If the Army wanted to pretend engineers invented the mirrors, fine, as long as they installed them. By January 1945, the modification was standard across all American armor units in Europe. Over 800 Shermans had mirrors. Production lines in the United States started including them in new tanks. The system was official, approved, no longer a field improvisation. Thompson continued loading for Crawford. They fought through the Battle of the Bulge, pushed into Germany, survived engagements that would have killed them 6 months earlier. The mirror saved them 4 more times. Each time, Crawford spotted a German tank trying to flank them. Each time, they fired first. Each time, Thompson stayed alive. Other crews had similar stories. Loaders who would have died in December were still alive in January, still alive in February, still fighting. The mirrors had become so common that new crews didn't realize they were originally unauthorized modifications. They thought the mirrors were factory equipment, standard Sherman design. Only the older crews knew the truth, knew that a desperate loader had installed the first mirror in September, knew that the modification had spread crew to crew, mechanic to mechanic, battalion to battalion, knew that it had saved hundreds of lives before the Army made it official. Thompson's work had changed how American tanks fought, but his name never appeared in any citation. No commendation, no medal, no official recognition. The engineering team took the credit. The Army accepted their version. And Thompson went back to loading shells. He'd saved Crawford, saved Hayes, saved hundreds of other tank crews. That was enough. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Thompson's crew was in Czechoslovakia when Germany surrendered. They'd fought for 11 months, survived dozens of engagements. The mirror had saved them 8 times. 8 times Crawford spotted German tanks trying to flank them. 8 times they fired first. 8 times Thompson kept loading instead of burning. Crawford survived the war. 63 combat engagements, 14 confirmed tank kills. He returned to Detroit in August 1945. Went back to factory work, got married, had 3 kids. He kept the photograph of his Sherman crew on his desk for 40 years. Thompson was in that photograph, standing next to the tank. Young, thin, covered in grease. Crawford never forgot what Thompson had done. Every year on September 19th, Crawford called Thompson, thanked him for installing the mirror, told him he wouldn't have survived without it. Thompson always said the same thing. He was just doing his job, keeping his crew alive. That's what loaders do. Thompson stayed in the Army until 1946, then went home to Pennsylvania, small town outside Pittsburgh. He worked in a steel mill for 32 years, same work he'd done before the war. Hot metal, heavy machinery, long shifts. He married in 1948, had 2 daughters, lived a quiet life. Thompson never talked about the mirror. When people asked about the war, he said he was a loader, worked on tank crews. That's all. He didn't mention the modification, didn't mention saving hundreds of lives, didn't mention that he'd changed how American tanks fought. It wasn't modesty. He just didn't think it mattered anymore. Hayes also survived, the gunner who'd lost his first loader. Hayes fought until Germany surrendered, never lost another crew member. He credited the mirror with saving his crew 3 times. After the war, Hayes became a high school teacher in Ohio, taught history. Sometimes he'd tell his students about tank combat, about how small innovations could save lives. He never mentioned Thompson by name, didn't know if Thompson wanted the attention. By the 1960s, the mirror modification had been forgotten. New tanks had better optics, better sighting systems, better everything. The Sherman was obsolete. Museums displayed them, veterans looked at them, but nobody remembered that hundreds of Shermans in Europe had crude mirrors mounted inside their turrets. Nobody remembered that a desperate loader had installed the first one in September 1944. The official Army history of armor development never mentioned Thompson. The engineering reports credited Ordnance Department innovations. The patents belonged to civilian contractors. Thompson's contribution had been erased from the record. Not intentionally, just through bureaucratic process. Field modifications weren't historically significant. Official engineering developments were. Thompson retired from the steel mill in 1978. Spent his retirement working in his garage, fixing cars, small engines. Same kind of work he'd done in the Army. His daughters knew he'd served in the war, knew he'd been a tank crewman, didn't know anything about mirrors. In 1992, a military historian researching Sherman modifications found references to improvised mirrors in maintenance logs from 4th Armored Division. The logs mentioned a Staff Sergeant Thompson. The historian spent 6 months tracking down veterans from that unit. Found Crawford. Crawford told him the whole story. About Martinez dying, about Thompson installing the mirror, about how it spread through the entire division. The historian found Thompson through veteran registries. Thompson was 74 years old, still living in Pennsylvania, still working part-time in his garage. The historian asked if he'd installed the mirrors. Thompson said yes. Asked why the historian cared about something that happened 50 years ago. The historian said he'd found maintenance logs from over 40 battalions, estimated that somewhere between 600 and 800 Sherman tanks had mirrors installed between September 1944 and May 1945. Based on survival rate improvements in units that used the mirrors versus units that didn't, the modification had probably saved between 200 and 300 American tank crew lives. Thompson said he'd never counted. He just remembered Crawford, and Hayes, and the others who came back. That was enough. The historian published his findings in 1994. A small article in a military history journal described the mirror modification, credited Thompson, included interviews with Crawford and Hayes. The article reached maybe 2,000 readers, mostly academics, veterans, history enthusiasts. Thompson received 3 letters after the article published. One from a former tank commander who'd used the mirror in Germany, said it had saved his crew twice. One from a loader who'd installed mirrors in 6th Armored Division, said he'd learned the technique from Thompson's crew chief. One from a museum curator asking if Thompson would donate his tools or any materials from the war. Thompson had nothing to donate. He'd left everything in Europe. Came home with his duffel bag and discharge papers. That's all. No souvenirs, no memorabilia. Just memories of Martinez and Kozlowski and the 11 others who died before Thompson figured out how to keep Crawford alive. Crawford visited Thompson in 1996, drove from Detroit to Pennsylvania. They hadn't seen each other in 40 years, talked for 6 hours, about the war, about the mirror, about the crews they'd lost and the crews they'd saved. Crawford said he'd tried for years to get Thompson recognized, written letters to the Army, to veterans organizations. Nobody cared. Too much time had passed. Too many bigger stories from the war. Thompson said he didn't need recognition. He had Crawford sitting in his garage, alive. That's recognition enough. Frank Thompson died on March 14, 2003. He was 84 years old. Heart failure. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his service in World War II as a tank crewman with 4th Armored Division. It did not mention the mirror modification. Did not mention that he'd saved hundreds of lives. Did not mention that he'd changed how American armor fought in Europe. His funeral was small. Family, a few friends. 3 men Thompson didn't know attended. They introduced themselves after the service. Tank veterans. Men whose crews had used the mirror modification. They'd read about Thompson's death in veterans' newsletters, wanted to pay respects, wanted his family to know what he'd done. Thompson's daughters learned the full story that day, learned their father had installed mirrors in tanks, learned those mirrors had saved lives, learned he'd done it without authorization, risking court-martial, learned he'd never talked about it because he didn't think it mattered. Today, Thompson's story exists in fragments. Maintenance logs in the National Archives, interview transcripts in military history collections, a paragraph in a book about Sherman tank modifications. Most people who study World War II armor have never heard of him. The mirror modification is a footnote, a curiosity, not significant enough for textbooks. But if you visit the Patton Museum at Fort Knox, you can see a Sherman tank from 4th Armored Division. Inside the turret, mounted to the left of the gunner's seat, there's a small rectangular mirror, 3 inches by 4 inches, metal frame, crude wire brackets. It's labeled as a field modification, common in late 1944. No name attached. That mirror is Thompson's legacy. Not the official one. The real one.
The one that mattered to Crawford and Hayes and the 200 others who survived because a desperate loader broke regulations to save his crew. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through committees or engineering teams. Through soldiers who see problems and fix them. Who don't wait for authorization. Who risk everything because their friends are dying and they can't stand watching anymore. Thompson installed a mirror to save Crawford. That mirror saved hundreds. And nobody remembers his name. But you do now. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button. Every like helps us rescue more forgotten stories from the archives and share them with people who care. Subscribe to join our community of history keepers. These stories don't preserve themselves. They need people like you who understand that the real heroes weren't always the ones with medals. Sometimes they were loaders with mirrors and the courage to break the rules. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Our audience stretches from Texas to Berlin, from tank museum volunteers to the grandchildren of Sherman crews. You're not just watching. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for making sure Frank Thompson's story doesn't fade into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.